to Cardozo Education Campus. Thank you to DCPS for opening your fantastic facility for us. For those I've not yet met, my name is Anna Smith, and I have the privilege of serving as our interim Deputy Mayor for Education. And I'm going to be leading us through the first portion of our conversation this evening. But the bulk of our discussion is really going to be happening amongst your tables. We want to make sure that we are hearing from you as part of this process. And so we're going to take 1 minute, and if you haven't yet done it, please go around and introduce yourself to the folks at your table. Your name, what brings you here this evening, if you are a parent, if you are an educator. Go ahead and introduce yourselves to your tables because you're going to be spending a lot of your time with them. And also I'd ask to have our staff, folks from the Executive Office of the Mayor, introduce themselves too because they will be serving as your facilitator. So go ahead and make sure you've done intros and we'll get back started. Fantastic. Well, if you haven't yet finished, you will have an opportunity to get to know these folks because, again, the bulk of our conversation will be with that table, your group today. The facilitators at your table, and if we don't yet have one there, we are moving folks around to make sure you have a facilitator. We'll be capturing all of the conversation this evening. But first, what we're going to start with is providing an overview of how we're going to spend our time this evening. So our agenda for the evening, we will spend our time giving a little bit of background and context for the process that we are participating in this evening. We'll talk a little bit about where we've come from and what we want to make sure that we are gathering and getting from all of you. And then really the bulk of our conversation will be in facilitated discussions at your table. Afterwards, we'll make sure that we have an opportunity to share out amongst the groups some of the outcomes of the activity that you will have. Now, I will talk a little bit more about what that activity will look like shortly. But first, I'd love to turn to a little bit of background and context about DCPS, where we are, talk about the Chancellor search process, where we are in that process as well, and then really hear feedback from all of you. So we find ourselves here at the start of the school year. Our extended school year students are already back up and running. I got to spend part of this morning at Hart Middle School and charging into the 18-19 school year. It's good to reflect upon sort of where we are. It's been a rocky year for many of us, for our students in particular. And so want to just share and talk about a couple highlights here, that there's a lot of successes that we want to make sure we are recognizing and thinking about as we enter the conversation today. That student achievement is up for all students across all subgroups. We have seen improvements in our standardized scores, in the outcomes of our students. Student satisfaction on the survey is at an all-time high, up from previous years, and that more programming, more than 800 students participated in internships from DCPS this summer with programs like NASA and Marriott and others. There's all these opportunities that our students are being able to partake in. But we also know that there are many challenges, that we have and continue to have persistent achievement gaps between groups of students, that only about 1/3 of our students are college and career ready. And we are not satisfied by that. Our graduation rates are still too low, and we know that if our students are going to be successful, that we have to arm them with not just the diploma, but the skills and experiences they need to be successful moving forward. So keep in mind this balance, because that is really what we are trying to strike right now, is recognizing all of the things that are going well that we should expand upon and do more of, but also focus on the areas, identify and discuss the things that aren't yet working well enough for all of our students that we want to be thoughtful about, particularly given the opportunity before us to bring in a new chancellor for DC Public Schools to tackle those issues. So I'm going to keep us moving and answer the question, what does the chancellor do? We're here at this opportunity in this forum to talk about the chancellor, talk about the type of leader we think our schools, our students need today. And I won't read all of this to you, but the chancellor's job is a pretty big deal. We are so lucky to have Interim Chancellor Alexander stepped up and is taking this on, but if you were to ask her or a chancellor in another school district what they do so many things. They are not only responsible for leadership and vision and direction, but management and oversight, things that we know particularly now are incredibly important for DC Public Schools. Are we executing what we set out to accomplish? They're also the head of human resources and making sure that we have talent, that we have amazing teachers, we have amazing principals in our schools working every day on behalf of our kids and attracting them and keeping them and developing them. From the budgeting to resources to make sure that these schools have what they need, the chancellor is in charge of all of those. And mostly, what many of you also probably know, being in this room tonight as parents, if you're a parent, raise your hand. Let's see, we got parents. If you're an educator, raise your hand. We got some educators. If you're a student, raise your hand. I think we got some students around here. If you're an advocate, raise your hand. So we got lots of different folks. Well, the chancellor is also responsible for cultivating, developing, and building relationships with all of these groups, making sure that the vision and the work of DC Public Schools remains informed and charging forward based on what these stakeholders aspire for our schools and our students. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what the chancellor search process is. Where are we? And I just want to take a moment and pause and reflect, again, that we find ourselves here at a difficult time. We were here just 2 years ago, engaging lots of folks, asking lots of questions. What is it that we want in a new chancellor? And events that have unfolded in the last year that you all know just as well as I have brought us to the moment where we have the opportunity to once again think about where we want our school system to head and who we need to take us there. But we'll talk about the few things and ways in which we are engaging the community now to make sure that we are informing, that the mayor is bringing in all the great thoughts and insight from this group and from folks across the city to help her make her selection of who the next chancellor will be. And so there's a few big buckets here. The Our Schools Leadership Committee, which advises the mayor on the engagement process, will ultimately help deliver a report. The citywide community engagement, of which you are a part. Thank you all for being here this evening. And then the search process. So we'll talk a little bit more about each of those in greater depth. So the Our Schools Leadership Committee, so 14 individuals, 2 of whom we have today. So if I'd ask them to stand up, please, and just wave, and want to say thank you to Danielle Amberger and to Dr. Charlene Drew Jarvis for serving on our committee. The committee members are attending each of the various opportunities we have to engage and listen to the community, to hear. They also helped advise us on what this should look like. How do we make sure these forums are accessible? What types of questions are we asking? What does our survey online look like? Who are the people we're talking to? And really, they're here to listen not just tonight, but all of the input we gather from tonight and all the other opportunities for engagement will be shared with all of them to review, along with other documents and letters that have been sent to the mayor and others, to make sure that as they put forward a final report, recommending to the mayor what we should look for in a chancellor, what the priorities are we should be thinking about for DCPS, that they are bringing all of this insight in. So I want to say thank you to Charlene and to Danielle for being here this evening, and they will be participating just like everyone else. And the committee really advises the mayor and serves an important purpose in helping to make sure that we are creating as inclusive process as possible. And so citywide engagement. So here we are at the very first forum. I know it's summer. I know that many schools have started, but many have not. So I want to say thank you for spending some of your time with us here this evening. But I wanted to call out a few ways in which you can engage, and we will remind you these at the end of the presentation this evening. And I encourage you to check out our ourschools.dc.gov website, where all of these opportunities are posted and more information will be posted about them. But we are doing a number of different channels in which we are going to be pulling information in with which to synthesize and advise the mayor as she selects the next chancellor. Community forums, focus groups. We'll be spending some time with teachers tomorrow at their professional development, hearing what they have to say, with principals later on in September, with some students. There's an online survey I encourage you to take, or encourage others who have not been able to come tonight to go online and give us some additional feedback there. And then we will also have a Facebook Live discussion later this fall. And then I will love to welcome up my colleague. Steve Walker is the director of the Mayor's Office of Talent and Appointments. And he and his office are really leading the search portion of this process. And so I'd love to turn it over to him.
Thank you. Thanks, Anna. How's everybody doing? How's everyone doing? We're really excited to have all of you here today. As Anna said, you guys are playing an important role in the search for the Chancellor. And that is to make sure we have great engagement from the community. So stakeholders, as Anna mentioned, we've got parents, teachers, advocates, residents of the District of Columbia who are all interested as we are is who the next Chancellor will be. So the process that the mayor outlined and announced at the end of June was to name the members of the committee. So again, thank you and congratulations to those members who are here, Danielle Amberger and Dr. Carleen Dew-Jarvis. And you all are playing a critical role today in helping us think through what are some of the critical factors that the next Chancellor should have. So I want to just reiterate one thing that you'll hear over and over today, and that's ourschools.dc.gov. It's the website that is the hub of information. If you know someone who's interested in tossing their name in the hat for the next Chancellor, the position is posted there. If you want to nominate someone to be the next Chancellor, please go to ourschools.dc.gov and look at the information. Or you can send an email to ourschools@dc.gov. So I'll repeat two things: the website, ourschools.dc.gov, the email address, ourschools@dc.gov. It's the place that we want you to send, again, people who are interested. It's the place you can go get information that you will need to know where we are in the process for the selection of the next Chancellor. I can't wait to walk around and listen to some of your suggestions and ideas tonight. I can't wait till our next meeting of Our Schools Committee where we start talking about the great information that you all are going to be sending to us. And I look forward to working with all of you today and at the next couple of sessions coming up.
Thank you, Steve. Great. So the next slide just gives a little bit more of an overview, and this will also be posted online. I recognize it's small. I apologize if you can't see it, but it really just details out how we're thinking about this process. Similar to how we thought about this a couple of years ago, we really want to move quickly. Our kids are learning every day. Our kids are already back in school or will soon be back in school. We know that there's work to be done, and we've been in this period of transition for quite some time. We're fortunate that we have strong leadership and folks at central office and in our schools doing the hard work of teaching, but we also want to make sure that we make a selection, we get a great Chancellor, and ensure that we have a smooth transition. Again, hopefully, as the mayor has shared, by the beginning of this next calendar year. So by January, we hope to have someone nominated, appointed, or named that will be informed through this process. But between now and October is really the fact-finding, the information gathering that we will be focused on helping to provide that information to the mayor. So a couple more slides, and I'm turning it all over to you. Oops, I think someone just hit the lights. Maybe someone stood next to a wall too closely. Thank you. Great. So before I get into the real meat of the conversation, a couple quick things. One, there might be questions, there might be things that we've gone through quickly in an effort to make sure that we're getting to the conversation and to hear from you. If there are questions that you have that are not answered, or if you have feedback or things that you want to provide us, your facilitators are pointed out to you, but you have a worksheet on your table, and on the back there's a big box. I encourage you, if there are outstanding questions or things that we don't get to talk about that you want to make sure we follow up on or we provide information on, I encourage you to leave those questions there. So if you're thinking about them, go ahead and capture it. And as Steve said as well, ourschools@dc.gov is an ongoing inbox that we are checking regularly where we welcome feedback and input. And also you'll note on the ourschools.dc.gov website, we've actually begun posting letters that we've received. So the forums that we have now, the conversations we're having, isn't the only data point. We know that there have been a number of other conversations that other city leaders have hosted to get input from folks about what they want in a Chancellor. There have been letters that have been sent to the mayor, to the advisory committee, and we are sharing all of those with the committee. So you can also find those on Our Schools as well, ourschools.dc.gov, letters from a couple of our council member friends, from some advocates, just to make sure that you all get to see the feedback that we're getting as well, to make sure that we are incorporating and synthesizing that in the report that's ultimately produced. So again, your feedback is captured and summarized, and we're excited to hear what you have to say. All right. But before we really dig in, I want to just take a couple minutes to call out one of the resources on your table. So as the advisory committee, our school's leadership committee, began the conversation, they've had a couple meetings so far, and thinking about how do we start this process again? We were just here. There's exasperation. Folks are feeling like, oh man, we have so much work to do. How can we spend time once again in this process? One of the things that they agreed on was making sure that we are thoughtful about and reflecting upon all of the engagement, all the voices, all the input that was gathered from hundreds and hundreds of residents just 2 years ago. To make sure that we are building upon and asking the question, what's new? What's different? What's changed from where we were a couple of years ago? Because as you'll see from the DCPS Rising report, which is also available online, that's also got copies on your desk, on your tables, it really captures a lot of really great thinking about what we want DCPS to focus on and prioritize, what we think we need in a chancellor. And if you look really closely too, you'll see that a lot of that has also been translated in the DCPS strategic plan. So the priorities that are guiding DCPS to this day, a lot of those are very, very similar to what we heard 2 years ago as part of our chancellor search process. So I just call those out both as a resource for the activity that you guys will have to leverage those, to look back to that, to think about to yourself what remains true, what's different, but also to show you that we are listening. This information is important, is critical to ensuring that the mayor has this advice for her as she seeks a new chancellor, and for DCPS as they're focused on priorities that are important to all of you. So just want to call that out. So before we get into the discussion, we're going to start with an icebreaker, a conversation, so that you all get to know not just who one another is, but where you're coming from. What are you bringing today? How are you feeling? I don't know about you, but I got lots of feels at the moment because, again, we're here 2 years later from doing a great process previously, and I just care about our kids learning and having the opportunity to be successful. So we have a question here that we want to take a minute. We'll give you an opportunity to reflect, and then your facilitator will give you about 4 or 5 minutes to have a discussion and to share what you're feeling right now about the general direction of DCPS. How are we doing? We gave a few thoughts up here to start the conversation, to get your brain juices flowing. We asked this question a couple years ago as well, and you'll find the results in the DCPS Rising report. But is DCPS on a strong path to success and needs to continue the work it's doing? Is DCPS on a path to success but needs to make some adjustments? Or does DCPS need to make significant changes? So think about where you are right here, right now, what most resonates with you. But I encourage you to also think about why? Why am I thinking of that? What are the examples? What are the reasons? What are the things that I think we keep doing if I think there's some things that are going well? What are the things I think we need to stop doing or do differently if there are things that I think we need to make significant changes about? So take a minute, take 2 minutes, think about that, reflect, and then facilitators, go ahead and start the conversation when your table is ready, and I'll pull us back. All right, so there are going to be 2 questions in particular that I think will connect a lot to the conversations I just heard. I heard at a table I joined concerns about resources, teachers having the tools and materials they need to be successful. I heard about concerns with accountability and other things. And so there are going to be 2 activities that you're going to be talking about at your table. And who here attended one of the mayor's budget engagement forums this year? Anyone been in one of those engagement forums besides us who work for the mayor? Well, they're a really cool conversation, and if you haven't been to one, I encourage you to come next year. But what we're going to be doing is taking an opportunity to both self-reflect and identify what we think are the things that are most important to us personally, and then we're going to engage in a discussion right? They always say that teaching is the best way to learn. As we think about what you personally think are the most important priorities for DCPS or characteristics of a chancellor, we're going to identify what we think personally is most important. And then as a table, you're going to have a discussion to synthesize and identify as a table what you think the top 3 are going to be. So you're going to have a conversation in which you're going to be able to discuss and dialogue and hear from one another about the things that they think are most important, that maybe were on your list, or the things that weren't on your list that you could be convinced about. And so these next 2 questions, I'm really going to turn it back over to the folks at your table to lead part of this. I'll give us the warning. We're doing well on time, so we'll have plenty of time to discuss. And again, your facilitators will be capturing all of these thoughts and ideas. But activity number 1 is DCPS priorities. This is a question we asked again 2 years ago, and we want to check in with you and ask, where are we? What's new? What's different? What's the same? And I would point you to the DCPS strategic plan document on your table. And we are going to ask you whether it's the priorities identified in this document that I'll flash up on the screen for you, whether it's other priorities that we haven't captured, whether it's priorities that are captured in the DCPS Rising report. Take a look at these. What do you believe are the 5 most important things that DCPS needs to focus on to get right, that we need a chancellor with a laser focus on in order to ensure that we are continuing to see improved student outcomes for our kids across the city? So I'm going to turn it over to tables in 1 second, but I'm going to ask one more time my friend over here to click just to the next one. You will find this, it's much more easily read in the strategic plan that you have in front of you, a capital commitment that was the result of thousands of people inputting, DCPS teachers and staff and principals and parents and families and community members, giving their thoughts about DCPS's strategic priorities that look a lot like the DCPS Rising feedback we heard, but there are 5 priorities here. You're not limited to these. Think about what else is not on here, what else is not in the DCPS Rising report, what else is important to you. And you're going to take some time, take about 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, and on your chart, on your paper that you have, your worksheet, what are the 5 most important things to you that you think DCPS needs to focus on, prioritize, and get right? And then I'll signal when your facilitators will tell you when everyone's got theirs completed. You guys will have a discussion, hear from one another, and identify your top 3 as a table. Any questions about the activity? All right, I'll turn it back over to you all and let you know when we have a couple minutes left. And I'm sorry, I just also want to take a moment to recognize we have been joined by a couple of our elected officials. I want to recognize Councilmember Alyssa Silverman, who has joined us this evening. I believe a representative of Councilmember Grasso's is here as well, if Akeem wants to raise his hand, but he's busy talking. And we also have Laura Wilson-Phelan, our Ward 1 Board of Education member as well. So I just want to say thank you all for being here. And now I'll turn it back to this conversation. Thanks, everyone. All right. I got sucked into a great conversation one more time. We are going to go around, and if you haven't gotten there, take this minute to make sure that you've identified as a table, what are the top 3? Uh-oh, I hear tables that aren't going to get there. Okay, raise your hand if you need 2 more minutes as a table. Okay, I will give you 2 more minutes, but we're going to have to be quick. So reporters, people who are going to call them out, be ready to talk quickly.
And so I just don't want to miss out on this attempt to cover it all up.
Second for me.
There's often this,
All right, in the interest of folks' time, I want to be respectful and I want to make sure we get out of here on time. So I'm going to actually ask at your table, reporter, choose priorities or your top 3. Now, we're going to capture all of them. All of this will be captured, rolled up, and shared with the advisory committee, shared with the mayor as she makes her selection, rolled up into our final report. So reporters at each table, because we're short on time, choose. Actually, this half of the room is going to select the top 3 priorities for DCPS, and this side of the room is going to report on the top 3 priorities in selection of a chancellor. All right, so we're going to start with this table right here. So you're going to talk about the priorities that you identified for DCPS. Why don't you stand up, introduce yourself, tell us your name, and then what your table came up with.
Hello, my name is Allison Brooks, and our table came up with 3 goals, which are to restore public trust, create equity at every school, and identify quality talent.
Awesome, thank you. Talent, equity, and restoring trust. All right, folks at Julio's table, who's reporting out for us here? Here you go. Introduce yourself, your name.
I'm sorry. My name is Karen Scott. I'm a parent. Our very lively discussion determined that we really want someone who's local, with local roots, who understands the intrinsic needs socially, economically of the children in the system.
What are the other 2? Keep us moving quick. Sorry about that.
Someone who has a willingness to rethink the reform that we went through a few years ago, back in the 2000s when the whole chancellor was created as opposed to the superintendent and everything that came with it. Honest data collection. Someone who's committed to asking the questions that you may not want to hear the answers to, so that you don't get the pretty answer that you're expecting. So honest data collection, and also rebuilding the neighborhood school.
That's
committed
4.
to that.
No, you were supposed to come up with 3. Cheaters. Thank you. All right. Top 3 things. We're gonna keep it quick. I'm gonna enforce. Top 3 priorities for DCPS.
Top 3 priority for DCPS. Good evening. I'm Emmanuel Epi. I teach here at Cardozo.
Thank you for hosting us.
No problem. The top 3 we came up with was 1, engaging families. We feel we definitely need to bring our families more a part of the work we do, empower our people, and promote equity. Is that fast?
That's great. I like this. Okay, we're not going to get to do every table because I want to make sure we get to the next steps. I'm going to do one more on this side, and then I'm going to go over to that side. Who's our reporter over here? Top 3 priorities for DCPS. You ready over there on that side of the room? Okay.
We're looking in a broad context here to the need to change the culture of DCPS from what it had been with a top-down, centrally managed culture with a focus on test scores, graduation rates, to a culture that is almost the opposite, that focuses on collaboration with all of the stakeholders, supporting all of the stakeholders, including particularly the principals, so that they can have more discretion to work with the staff to run their own schools. And the third is to focus on developing each school, particularly the neighborhood schools point that was just made, each school into a good school.
Quality, absolutely. Thank you. All right, now we're going to be even more efficient. I love it. Steve, are you sure you weren't an elementary school teacher lining folks up over here? All right, we're going to go really quickly with these folks who are going to identify what are the top priorities in selection of a chancellor. What should the mayor be focused on and thinking about? What did we come up with?
Thank you. I'm Jason Andrian. We want someone who's an insider, who knows our system, who knows what's broken and what needs to be fixed. We want someone who has teaching experience. We want someone who's willing to work at the ground level and has deep cultural competence.
Great, pass it on. Oh, sorry guys, come over here. Thank you.
Picking up on cultural competency, this was our #1 item. Somebody who should have a great ability to communicate with very diverse kinds of people, diverse by class as well as by ethnicity. Somebody who's personally relatable to a lot of different kinds of people. #2, somebody who's a really strong critical thinker. And I'm only authorized to discuss 2 of our items.
Good evening. My name is DeAndre Anderson. I'm from Table 17. And the top 3 qualities that we want in a chancellor was a visionary leader, someone who can come into DCPS and do things differently. We want a person who has quality experience and we want a person who can engage the community to get them involved.
My name's Maria. I live in Ward 5. I'm a student at DCPS. So what I would want in a chancellor would be having more knowledge about the community, to be able to actually to be opened up about people from different backgrounds, and another one to be more engaged in the community, to actually be able to show that he is, that we're important to him or she. And the second one who's a visionary, who's determined to pass or to do what he or she wants to do, to not just say what they want to do and not actually do it, but actually be determined to do it. So.
Good job.
I'm Howard from Ward 1, and this is from Table 3. We would like our chancellor to prioritize parent and student involvement, understand the different needs of different neighborhoods, and someone who is fearless and will fight for the DCPS values.
Hi, I'm Emily Gasway from Ward 1, and so I've been told I can only give one now. So we came up with whole child approach and deep experience with education, but with creative out-of-the-box thinking, and hopefully some experience outside of education that they're bringing to the table.
All right, I'm Aaron Jenkins. I live in Ward 8 and a proud DCPS graduate. Woo-hoo! And I was also told to do one, and I think one that resonated was for Table 11 was someone with experience in the classroom. If you have not managed students, if you have not stood in front of students and have had to manage them, managing a system means you should have that experience as well. So classroom management, and what's tied with that is executive management.
Good afternoon. My name is Neil Downing. I'm a DC Public School parent, former student, and educator at Allison Middle School. We were talked about on my table having a PhD that has been through the ranks, so to say, has the actual PhD, the education level and experience to help fill the gaps that exist at each school. Every school has a gap where you run out of resources, you run out of the learning gap. But some schools, because it's not across the board, some schools are able to fill that gap with teachers put in extra, parents put in extra. So how do we broaden that across the board? How do we balance it out?
Yeah. All right, so Andre Towner from Ward 8. And so Table 16 wants someone that understands DC culture. And so that means that they're active and engaged in the community and they're accessible so that residents have unfiltered access to whoever the next chancellor will be.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much. And thank you for adjusting. Nothing like good teacher skills to just keep it going. And thank you all for being so engaged. I'm going to go to our last slide up here. Keep going, last one. And just say thank you. On behalf of Mayor Bowser, the administration, all of my mayor's office colleagues who have facilitated the conversation, and on behalf of all of our students in DC Public Schools, I just want to say thank you for spending your evening here, for closing us out strong. This is our first of 3 forums, and I want to make sure that you stay engaged. So we've got a couple of ways up here. I'm going to make a plug again, as Steve did, for ourschools.dc.gov website, where we're going to keep posting our notes and opportunities for engagement, letters that we receive. I encourage you to email us if there are questions or feedback that you weren't able to capture on your worksheet. Please make sure you put your name and your ward, leave it on your table. Your facilitator will grab that. You can always email us at ourschools@dc.gov. You can follow us on Twitter and on Instagram and Facebook. I just wanted to make sure we got all the platforms correct at Our Schools DC. Thank you, my team back there. Follow us, stay engaged. And we have 2 more large forums coming up at Savoy and at Brookland, so I encourage you to tell your friends about it. And then stay tuned. We will share back out with folks who have participated and been part of this process as we culminate, as we continue to move along in the search of an amazing chancellor who is focusing on the priorities you identified and has the characteristics you've talked about tonight. So please make sure, final thing, thank you, Kasman. On the back of your worksheet, if you take 2 seconds, give us a little feedback. We have 2 more of these to go. What are the things that we did well? What are the things we can do better? As a continuously learning organization, please help us make sure that we are doing a good job for the rest of the residents that will participate. And make sure you leave your worksheet. Thank you and have a wonderful night, everyone.